They made me feel like a ghost in my own life. That's the only way I can describe waking up for the 5th morning in a row on my daughter's lumpy pull-out sofa, sunlight leaking through cheap blinds and pooling on the floor around the suitcases that held everything I owned. If you've ever felt invisible in a place you once called home, then you know the ache I'm talking about. Before I go on, I need you, yes, you, watching this, to hit subscribe, leave a comment telling me where you're tuning in from, and share this video if you've ever felt overlooked by the people you love. I promise, you're not alone. The scratchy wool of that faded blue blanket clung to me as I forced myself upright. My lower back ached in the exact spot where a spring was forever poking through the cushion. I glanced across the room, where Maggie's designer handbag, one of those purses that costs more than my first car, was perched on the coffee table, right next to my plastic pharmacy pill organizer. Her husband, Andrew, was in the kitchen, methodically slicing an avocado for his morning smoothie, headphones jammed in his ears. Their world was all glass and chrome and bright splashes of yellow, everything perfectly curated for the Instagram photos Maggie took when she thought I wasn't looking. Through the wall, I heard their voices, low, urgent. They always whispered now, like I was some kind of problem to be solved. She needs to start looking for a more permanent solution, Maggie was saying, her voice sharp in a way I didn't recognize. Andrew mumbled something about senior living communities, about how, there are great programs now, Mom could make friends. The words floated through the drywall and landed like stones in my chest. I wrapped myself in my cardigan, soft lilac, pilled at the elbows, and shuffled to the kitchen. Maggie had left a bowl of blueberries on the counter, but I didn't dare touch them. "Morning, Mom," she said, finally looking up from her phone. "Did you sleep okay?" Her tone was polite, but her eyes darted away before I could answer. I mumbled something about getting up early, grabbed a mug, and filled it with lukewarm water from the tap. The fancy coffee maker, a wedding gift from Andrew's parents, sat like a monument on the counter, off limits, just like the good towels, just like the thermostat, just like everything else in their shiny, quiet world. Andrew finally removed his headphones. "So, did you give any more thought to the options we talked about?" He tried to smile, but it wobbled. "You'd have your own space. Privacy. And there's a shuttle for shopping and appointments." "Right," I said, trying not to sound small. "A retirement home. At 59. "It's not like that," Maggie cut in, her tone a little too bright. "It's independent living, Mom. You can come and go, and there are activities," and she stopped when she saw my face. I pressed my lips together. The coffee tasted bitter even though I hadn't added any grounds. "I thought maybe I could stay until I get things figured out," I said, twisting the mug in my hands. Maggie glanced at Andrew, then back at me. With the new baby coming, we really need the space." She smoothed her silk dress over her growing belly, not quite showing yet but already the center of every plan they made. My whole life, reduced to 2 battered suitcases, a half-used bottle of lotion, and whatever dignity I could scrape together for another day. That's how exile happens, not with a dramatic slam of the door, but with 1,000 little reminders that you don't belong. That you are a guest. That you are an inconvenience. And yet, as I stared at the tiny white ceramic bird perched on Maggie's kitchen window, a decoration I'd given her on her first anniversary, I felt something shift. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just stubbornness refusing to be erased. Either way, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. I just didn't know, not yet, how much further I would have to fall before I could rise again. I tried to keep busy, though there was little to do. Maggie's apartment was one of those minimalist places where every object had its place and anything that didn't fit was quietly shuffled out of sight. I folded the sofa bed, tucking my blanket and pillow away as tightly as I could, so the living room would look normal by the time Maggie came out with her second cup of imported coffee. She'd once asked me to make myself at home, but I'd learned quickly that what she really meant was, "Please, leave no trace." Mornings always felt longest. I'd sit at the tiny dining table paging through a battered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, the only book I'd insisted on bringing, while Andrew watched financial news on his tablet, Maggie scrolled her phone, and the world outside seemed to go on without me. I wondered if any of Maggie's friends knew I was there, quietly occupying the margins of her perfect life. When the mail arrived, Maggie handed me a small stack without looking up. Most of it was junk, but one envelope, windowed and official, made my stomach clench. It was from the attorney handling my divorce from Charlie, my husband of 35 years. The envelope was thin, not promising, and I knew better than to open it with witnesses. Instead, I slid it into my purse to read in private later. I didn't want them to see the look on my face. Andrew's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and then turned to Maggie. "Don't forget, your mom's expecting us at the Bistro Blue tonight. She wants to show us the renovations." Maggie groaned softly, pressing her forehead to the table. "Can we just skip it? I'm exhausted." He gave her a helpless look. "You know your mom, Mags. She won't take no for an answer." I tried not to smile. Judy, a force of nature with a taste for lavender and gold, had never approved of me, but at least she treated family like family. I caught myself thinking how odd it was, being jealous of my daughter's mother-in-law, and then just felt tired all over again. The afternoon passed in a blur of small chores, folding laundry, organizing the hall closet, wiping fingerprints from the stainless steel fridge. These were the ways I tried to earn my keep. Maggie never asked, but I hoped that maybe, just maybe, she'd notice and feel grateful, even for a moment. At 4, I took a walk through the neighborhood. Mayfair Lane was nothing like the street where I'd raised Maggie. Here, the sidewalks were lined with tulips and dogwoods, every house a quiet marvel of perfect paint and trimmed hedges. I passed joggers with their golden retrievers, couples pushing strollers, and not one person made eye contact. I might as well have been invisible. I ended up at the corner market, a little place called Samir's, where the clerk always greeted me by name. "Mrs. Ellis, back for your yogurt?" Samir grinned, pushing his glasses up his nose. I smiled, grateful for the familiarity. "And maybe a lottery ticket," I said, holding up a crumpled $10 bill. "You feeling lucky?" he teased. I shrugged. "I'm due for a miracle, Samir." He laughed, tore off a quick pic, and handed me my change. "You never know, Mrs. Ellis. Good things happen every day." Outside, I paused beneath a sycamore and looked at the rows of numbers on the ticket. How many times had I bought hope for $1? How many nights had I lain awake picturing a life where I wasn't at someone's mercy, where I had enough, just enough, to be free? When I got back to the apartment, the place was empty. A note on the counter in Maggie's handwriting said, "Dinner at 7, Bistro Blue. Please make yourself comfortable." I tried not to read between the lines. There was half a can of soup in the fridge, lentil, my favorite, so I heated it up in the microwave and ate standing over the sink. The apartment was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of Maggie's lemon-yellow kitchen clock. Finally, I opened the lawyer's letter. It was exactly what I feared: more delays, more complications, another reminder that I was nobody's priority. My half of the assets was still locked in legal limbo, pending signatures and arguments and some missing paperwork that Charlie's new attorney claimed never arrived. I crumpled the letter, tossed it in the trash, and stared at my reflection in the microwave door. My eyes looked tired, my hair too gray at the roots, my mouth set in a line I barely recognized. As the evening crept in, I sat on the tiny balcony, listening to city sounds, the faraway siren, the thrum of tires on wet pavement, the laughter of a couple walking by below. I imagined what I'd say if someone asked about my life. Would I admit the truth? That I was sleeping on my daughter's sofa, living out of suitcases, hoping for a call from a lawyer or a job or the universe itself to throw me a lifeline? Night fell, and Maggie and Andrew returned in a whirl of restaurant perfume and leftovers. How was dinner? I asked, trying to sound cheerful. Wonderful, Maggie said, but she looked exhausted. She disappeared into the bedroom without another word. Andrew offered me a tired smile, shrugged, and followed. I was left alone in the blue light of the TV, lottery ticket in hand, wondering if tomorrow would be any different. I pressed the ticket between my palms, whispering a prayer to no one in particular. Then I turned out the light and curled up on the sofa, willing myself to dream of anywhere but here. I woke before sunrise to the clatter of Andrew's running shoes on the hardwood floor. The city was still dark, the sky a watery blue-gray beyond the window. I lay quietly for a few minutes, my breath slow and measured, listening to the quiet rhythm of the household as it came alive. Somewhere down the hall, Maggie's phone chirped with a calendar reminder, a sound I had come to dread. Every hour of her life was scheduled, every minute accounted for, and I was just one more item on her to-do list. The apartment filled with the scent of toasted sourdough and brewed espresso. I slipped into the bathroom to shower, careful not to leave a trace. No stray hairs, no water spots, no evidence that I'd been there at all. The hot water ran out after just 2 minutes, a familiar signal that my place here was temporary, conditional, revocable at any moment. Maggie emerged from the bedroom, her hair in a loose chignon, wearing a mint green blouse that made her look both impossibly young and older than her years. She caught my eye and hesitated, mug in hand. I put out some fruit for you, Mom, she said, voice gentle but distant. I have to leave early for a doctor's appointment. Andrew's working from home if you need anything. She hesitated, as if searching for a softer version of herself, then turned away. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a bowl of nectarines. My hands shook as I reached for the coffee jar, only to remember, again, that the good coffee was for guests, not for me. I settled for tea, sipping it slowly, letting the warmth calm my nerves. The morning passed in a fog. I called the county job center for the 5th time in 2 weeks. No answer, just the chirpy voice of a recording telling me to check their website. My laptop, a hand-me-down from Maggie, was too slow to load most job boards, and even when it did, I felt invisible. No one wanted a 59-year-old woman whose last real job was decades ago, no matter how well she managed a home or budgeted a family's survival. By mid-afternoon, a steady rain tapped against the windows, a sound that reminded me of old summers, of home. I wandered the apartment restlessly, picking up discarded magazines, folding throws, wiping down the kitchen counters that already gleamed. I wished there were something more useful to do, something that made me feel less like a guest and more like a mother. That evening, as the rain eased to a drizzle, Maggie arrived home with an armful of groceries and a heavy silence. I tried to help unload the bags, but she shook her head. I've got it, Mom. Go relax. I hovered nearby anyway, not knowing what else to do. We sat down to dinner, roasted chicken, couscous salad, a bright stack of green beans. I wanted to savor it, but I tasted only my own embarrassment, every bite reminding me that I contributed nothing to this meal, this table, this life. Conversation was polite, surface level, full of news about the baby, about Andrew's work, about the latest city council vote. When Maggie asked me how my day had been, I shrugged. Nothing much. I called about a few jobs, did some cleaning. Samir at the market says hello. Maggie nodded, looking distracted. I realized she hadn't really heard me. I excused myself and retreated to the living room, curling up with my book, though the words danced on the page. Eventually, Andrew joined me, sitting on the edge of the armchair, hands folded. Emily, he said quietly. We're grateful to have you here, truly. But Maggie's, well, she's anxious. The baby's coming, and we have to get things in order. I know it's hard. I just want you to understand where we're coming from. I do, I said, though my voice sounded far away, hollow. He nodded and returned to the kitchen, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and my own looping thoughts. Later, as I prepared for bed, I noticed the lottery ticket peeking from the pocket of my purse. I stared at it, feeling almost foolish. Still, I smoothed it flat on the coffee table, watching the numbers line up in tidy columns. I left it there, a silent dare to fate. The TV murmured in the background as I folded the blanket, my hands aching with the effort to make everything look neat. On the screen, a news anchor announced the winning numbers for that night's state jackpot: 16, 22, 38, 44, 51, and the Powerball, 9. I reached for my ticket, heart pounding. I read the numbers once, twice, and then a third time. My breath caught in my throat. Every single number matched. My hands trembled as I pressed the ticket to my chest, barely able to breathe. Was it possible? Was this really happening? The ticket fluttered between my fingers like a living thing. In that instant, the entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. The rain outside became a symphony, the air electric with possibility. I stood there, suspended between fear and hope, between everything I'd lost and everything I might become. Tomorrow, I thought, tomorrow everything changes. But for now, I let the wonder wash over me, a fragile, dizzying hope blooming inside my chest. I barely slept that night. The winning ticket stayed on the coffee table, weighted beneath my empty tea mug, as if I needed proof that what I'd seen was real. My mind raced in restless circles. What if I was wrong? What if I was dreaming? What if, just this once, luck had finally chosen me? Before dawn, I got up and checked the numbers again, my fingers trembling so badly I almost tore the paper. 16, 22, 38, 44, 51, Powerball 9. Over and over, the numbers glowed up at me from the slip of paper, their meaning both impossible and absolute. When the sun finally bled gold through the clouds, I pulled on my walking shoes and slipped out of the apartment before Maggie or Andrew could wake. The city felt softer in those early hours, the sidewalks empty except for the occasional jogger or delivery van. I walked to Samir's market, clutching the ticket in my jacket pocket, rehearsing 1,000 explanations in case anyone questioned why I was out so early. Samir was stacking boxes behind the counter, humming an old Bollywood song. When he saw me, he grinned. "Mrs. Ellis. You're up with the birds today." "Couldn't sleep," I said, my heart pounding. I lowered my voice. "Samir, could you check something for me?" He nodded, taking the ticket. For a moment, he squinted at the numbers, then at the printout from last night's draw. I watched as his expression changed, confusion, surprise, and then something like awe. He looked up at me, eyes wide. "Emily, you won. This is real. You're a millionaire." The world spun. I held on to the edge of the counter for balance, the air thick with the scent of overripe bananas and ground coffee. Samir came around and pressed a chair beneath me. Sit. You want some water?" I could only nod, my throat too tight for words. He returned with a bottle and a fistful of napkins, his hands shaking almost as badly as mine. "You have to sign the back right now," he urged, sliding a pen into my hand. "And you must keep it safe, Emily. Don't tell anybody yet. Not until you talk to the lottery office." I signed my name, each letter shaky but real. I tucked the ticket deep into my purse, wrapping it in a clean napkin. "Thank you, Samir. I don't know what to do next." He squeezed my hand. "Call the number on the back. They'll tell you everything. But please, be careful. People will come out of the woodwork." On the walk back, my mind felt like a snow globe shaken too hard, old fears, new hopes, memories of every struggle I'd endured since Charlie left. There was no one I could call, not yet, no one I trusted with the truth. For the first time in years, my secret was mine alone. Back at the apartment, Maggie was already dressed for work, poring over her planner at the kitchen island. "Where have you been?" she asked, half concerned, half irritated. I went for a walk. Needed some fresh air, I replied, keeping my voice steady. She shrugged, already distracted. We need to talk about the apartment situation tonight, she said, eyes never leaving her phone. Andrew's looking at a few new options for you. Maybe some shared housing downtown or a retirement condo out near the lake. Let's discuss after dinner, okay? I nodded, the words washing over me like static. Inside, everything was different. For the first time since Charlie's betrayal, since I'd moved into this borrowed life, I felt the faintest pulse of power return. As soon as they left, I followed Samir's instructions and called the lottery office. The woman on the phone was calm, professional, unfazed by my stammering disbelief. She confirmed the numbers, explained the verification process, and set an appointment for me to come in the following day. Bring photo ID, your social security card, and the winning ticket. And Ms. Ellis, congratulations. I hung up, then just stood in the silence, trying to process it all. I wandered through Maggie's apartment, touching the glossy kitchen counters, the velvet throw pillows, the abstract art prints on the walls. I'd always felt like a visitor here. Now, suddenly, every room seemed to shimmer with possibility. This was not my home, but I no longer needed it to be. By midday, nerves gave way to planning. I dusted off the notebook I'd used to keep track of my meager savings and began sketching out ideas. A cottage in the country, a house with a porch swing and a rose garden, a place where I could grow old on my own terms. Maybe I'd start a little business, nothing big, but something to keep my hands and heart busy. For the first time in forever, I let myself imagine a future that was more than just surviving. That evening, when Maggie and Andrew came home, I played my part as always. I made dinner, lemon chicken and steamed asparagus, then listened patiently as they discussed possible living arrangements. I nodded at all the right places, biting my tongue every time I wanted to shout that everything was about to change. Afterward, I stood on the balcony, the city lights glittering below. I pressed my palm against my heart, feeling the wild rush of hope and terror tangled together. No matter what happened next, I would never be powerless again. Tomorrow, I would step into a new world. But tonight, I let myself savor the secret, the small, fierce flame of freedom burning in the quiet dark. The next morning, I left before sunrise again, the city painted in lavender and slate, my breath hanging in the chilly air as I made my way downtown. The lottery office was housed in an unremarkable state building, its halls echoing with the quiet shuffle of bureaucratic footsteps and the low hum of fluorescent lights. I clutched my purse to my chest, ticket and documents safely inside, as I checked in at the front desk. The woman behind the glass barely glanced at me as she handed over a clipboard of forms, but I noticed a flicker of curiosity in her eyes when she read the claim amount. I sat in the waiting area, knees bouncing, heart rattling in my chest. The minutes dragged, my mind racing through 100 scenarios. What if they said it was a mistake? What if someone tried to take it from me? What if I fainted before they finished the paperwork? When my name was called, I followed a neatly dressed man named Mr. Stanton down a hallway lined with photos of smiling winners holding oversized checks. "Congratulations, Ms. Ellis," he said, shaking my hand with practiced warmth. "Let's verify everything and get you on your way." He took the ticket, examined it under a small lamp, and entered the numbers into his computer. I watched his face for any sign that something had gone wrong, but he just nodded and began explaining my options: lump sum or annuity, the mountain of taxes, the press conference I could refuse for now. I chose the lump sum, quick and quiet. I signed page after page, my hands starting to cramp, each signature another brick in the foundation of my new life. Mr. Stanton handed me a folder with instructions, financial counseling contacts, and a letter confirming the deposit to come. "Take your time," he said, "and think carefully about your next steps. Privacy is a luxury most winners underestimate." I left through a side door, blinking in the sudden sunlight, clutching my new identity in a plain manila envelope. For the first time in years, I walked with my head high. I didn't go straight back to Maggie's. Instead, I wandered through downtown, letting the city's noise and energy steady me. I stopped for a coffee at a little place called Periwinkle Cafe, choosing a seat by the window where I could watch people hurry by, unaware that the quiet woman in the corner was now a millionaire. I wrote lists on a napkin, things I wanted, things I needed, things I would never tolerate again. The freedom was dizzying. That afternoon, I took the bus out to Brookside, a neighborhood I'd loved since childhood, with tall maples arching over the streets and tidy bungalows tucked behind flowerbeds bursting with irises and daylilies. I walked block after block, letting myself imagine living in one of those houses, a place with a porch and a real mailbox, somewhere I could plant roots that no one could pull up. At a small real estate office on Oak Ridge Avenue, a young agent named Jenna greeted me. "Looking for something in the area?" she asked. "Something quiet, something with a garden, something mine," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. Jenna smiled, understanding more than I said. She showed me 3 listings: an old craftsman with stained glass windows, a brick ranch with a sprawling backyard, and a small white cottage with climbing roses tangled along the fence. I lingered over the cottage. It needed work, new paint, a new roof. The kitchen was from another century, but it felt alive, waiting for someone to love it again. By the time I returned to Maggie's, dusk was settling in, the city softening around the edges. I found her on the couch, laptop balanced on her knees, Andrew standing nearby with a stack of folders. They looked up as I walked in, a flicker of surprise in their eyes. "Long day?" Andrew asked. "I had some errands," I replied, setting my purse by the door. "Just clearing my head." Maggie closed her laptop, her expression shifting to concern. "We were thinking, maybe you could look at some of these condos tomorrow. The realtor sent some links." I smiled gently. "Thank you, but I think I've found a place that suits me." She blinked, caught off guard. "Really? Already?" "I'm still working out the details," I said. "But I feel good about it." Andrew nodded, relieved. "That's great, Emily. Really. Just let us know how we can help." I excused myself to my room, my corner of the sofa, really, heart beating with quiet triumph. I lay there in the glow of the city lights, thinking of the cottage, the garden, the rose bushes I would plant. For the first time in a long time, I felt the world opening up instead of closing in. Outside, a gentle spring rain tapped against the windows, as if the universe itself was rooting for me. The next few days passed in a blur of signatures and decisions, each one setting me further apart from the woman I'd been. Jenna moved fast. By Tuesday afternoon, she called to say the cottage owners had accepted my offer, cash, as is, no contingencies. The paperwork was all digital, everything handled with quiet efficiency, and when I pressed the sign button for the final time, I felt a hush settle over me, a solemnity that was almost sacred. I was no longer just passing through someone else's life. I was carving out my own place in the world. I kept my plans secret from Maggie and Andrew. It wasn't spite, not exactly. I just wanted this one piece of happiness to be truly mine, unshaped by their opinions or doubts. Still, I caught myself hesitating at dinner, wanting to tell Maggie about the lavender hedges behind the cottage, the clawfoot tub in the tiny upstairs bathroom, the old sycamore shading the porch swing. Instead, I listened to her talk about baby names, daycare waitlists, the prenatal yoga class she was starting at the community center on Grant Avenue. "I just want everything to be perfect," she said, running a hand along the curve of her belly. I reached across the table and squeezed her fingers. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, Maggie. Trust yourself." She looked away, blinking hard, and I wondered if she heard the pride in my voice or just the ache. That night, I packed my suitcases again, folding my clothes more carefully than ever. I added my book, my photo album, the carved wooden hairbrush my mother had given me when I was 16. I left the blanket behind, the one that smelled of old memories and cheap detergent. I wouldn't need it anymore. In the morning, while Maggie and Andrew were at work, I called a taxi and loaded my things into the trunk. The driver, a young woman with a streak of blue in her hair, chatted easily about her college classes, her plans for the summer. She didn't ask why I was moving, and I didn't volunteer the story. We drove past the familiar haunts of my old life, the library where I'd read to Maggie as a child, the bakery where Charlie and I had spent lazy Saturdays, the church with its bell tower etched against the sky. The cottage was waiting for me, sunlight splashed across the white clapboard, the front steps dappled with shade from the big sycamore. Jenna met me at the door, her arms full of wildflowers from the garden. "Welcome home, Emily," she said, and I felt tears prick my eyes at the simple kindness of it. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of lemon and old books. I wandered from room to room, letting my fingertips graze the windowsills, the battered oak table in the kitchen, the faded floral wallpaper in the bedroom. I stood in the yard, watching sparrows dart through the lavender, and for a long moment, I just breathed. I belonged here, as surely as the stones belonged in the garden path. After the movers arrived with the few pieces of furniture I'd bought, a small bed, a bookshelf, a rocking chair I found at a thrift shop, I started to unpack. I played old jazz records on the radio and opened the kitchen windows, letting the air carry my music out into the world. With every box I emptied, the cottage grew more like me, hopeful, battered, alive. As dusk settled, I sat on the front porch with a cup of strong tea, listening to the quiet tick of insects in the tall grass. My phone vibrated with a text from Maggie. "Hope your day went well, Mom. Let us know if you need anything." I typed back, "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm settling in just fine. You focus on you and the baby. I love you." She sent a flurry of heart emojis. I stared at them, a little stunned by the gap between our realities. For so long, I'd chased their love and approval, made myself small for their comfort. Now, sitting in my own home, I realized I didn't need their permission to be happy. Night fell gently over the cottage. I locked the doors, turned out the lights, and crawled into my new bed. The sheets smelled of sun and lavender. I lay there, listening to the wind moving through the sycamore, and felt peace settle over me, a peace I had not known in years. Tomorrow, I would begin again. My first week at the cottage passed in a gentle blur. Every morning I rose with the sun, surprised by how rested I felt. No more couch springs pressing against my back, no creaks or whispers through the wall. Instead, there was the hush of dew on grass, the soft coo of morning doves perched on the garden fence, and the ritual comfort of brewing my own coffee in a chipped turquoise kettle. I poured my energy into making the cottage truly mine. I scrubbed the windows until they sparkled, repainted the porch swing in robin's egg blue, and planted marigolds and nasturtiums along the front walk. There was a slow magic in these small labors, each one erasing a little more of the ache I'd carried from Maggie's apartment. I was building something new, brick by brick, something that no one could take from me. I explored the neighborhood, introducing myself to neighbors as I passed their yards. Mrs. Connors, 2 doors down, brought over a loaf of warm zucchini bread as a housewarming gift. "You'll like it here," she said, peering at me through bifocals. "It's quiet, but it's real. People look out for each other." Her words settled inside me, hopeful and bittersweet. I had spent so many years looking after everyone else, Charlie, Maggie, even Andrew, and now I was learning what it meant to be looked after, even in small ways. On Wednesday, I took the bus downtown and met with a financial advisor from the list the lottery office had given me. His name was Peter, soft-spoken, with gentle eyes and a navy blue suit. He explained taxes, trusts, and investments, all the while treating me with a respect I hadn't felt in a long time. "Your life is yours now, Ms. Ellis," he told me, sliding a stack of forms across the table. "Whatever you want to build, you have the means." On the way home, I treated myself to lunch at a sunny cafe I'd admired for years but never entered. I sat by the window, savoring a fresh arugula salad and lemon tart, and watched the world go by. So many people, each with their own secret burdens and silent victories. That evening, I started a notebook, jotting ideas for ways I could use my new fortune. I wanted to do more than just buy comfort, I wanted to help. I thought about single mothers at the market, the tired clerk at the pharmacy, the quiet neighbor who lived alone in the cottage behind mine. Maybe, I scribbled, I could start a community garden, or sponsor scholarships for girls who'd been told their dreams were impractical. My dreams felt possible now, rooted and growing with every page. Maggie called a few times during that week, always in a rush, her voice bright but brittle. "How's the new place, Mom? Is everything okay? You sure you don't want help unpacking?" I reassured her every time, keeping the conversation light. She didn't ask where I'd gotten the money, or how I'd found the place so fast. Maybe she didn't want to know, or maybe she was just too wrapped up in her own life to look beneath the surface. One evening, she mentioned in passing that Andrew's job was going through some shakeups. "He's a little stressed," she admitted, lowering her voice. "There were layoffs in his division, and I think he's worried he might be next. But I'm sure it'll work out. He always lands on his feet." I offered the expected reassurances, but after we hung up, a chill crept over me. I remembered how quickly life could shift beneath you, how the things you took for granted could vanish overnight. That night, as I watered the marigolds in the fading light, I thought about how fragile happiness could be. I resolved then that I would not let my good fortune make me hard or blind to the suffering of others. I would savor what I'd been given, but I would also remember what it felt like to have nothing and no one. For the first time in years, I slept with the windows open, breathing in the scent of earth and rain. My heart felt steady. I was not just surviving anymore, I was living. It was nearly a month after moving in when Maggie's world began to unravel. The first sign came in the form of a shaky phone call one Tuesday morning. I was kneeling in the garden, pulling up stubborn weeds, when my phone buzzed. Maggie's name glowed on the screen, and I could tell instantly by her voice that something was wrong. "Mom, do you have a minute?" Her words tumbled out, faster than usual. Andrew's company had more layoffs. He didn't get cut, but they slashed his hours and his bonus. He's not handling it well. He keeps saying it's just a bump, but I can tell he's scared. I sat on the porch steps, shoes muddy, listening as she tried to sound brave. "We'll be fine. We always are. But I feel so tired, Mom. Sometimes it's like no matter how much I plan, life just laughs at me." I wanted to drive over, to put my arms around her, to offer a home-cooked meal and the comfort of my presence. But I also knew that what she really needed was someone to listen without judgment. "You're stronger than you think, Maggie," I told her quietly. "You and Andrew both. These things never last forever." She sniffled, and I heard the soft thump of her closing a door, seeking privacy even in her own home. "I miss you, Mom. I know I wasn't always the easiest when you lived here, but it's different now. The apartment feels empty. And I know I didn't always say thank you for everything." It was the closest she'd come to an apology. I let the silence settle, filling it with all the love I'd ever had for her. "You're welcome, sweetheart," I said. "I always did my best." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, watching a line of ants march across the stones. It was strange to realize that I no longer ached for Maggie's approval, no longer measured my worth by her gratitude. I'd built a whole new life for myself, one that didn't rely on anyone's acceptance. But I still worried for her. By the end of that week, the calls grew more frequent. Maggie sounded tired, distracted, sometimes weepy. Andrew's situation worsened, his paychecks shrank, then stopped entirely. They tried to hide their panic, but I heard it in every clipped word and awkward pause. When they mentioned putting the apartment up for rent, my heart twisted. One rainy Friday evening, Maggie called in tears. "Mom, I know this is a lot to ask, but, if things get worse, could we come stay with you for a little while? Just until we get back on our feet?" I hesitated, memories of those uncomfortable nights on her sofa rising up like ghosts. But I remembered too how life had felt when I had nowhere else to turn. "You always have a place with me, Maggie," I answered, though my tone was firmer than she expected. "But things are different now. I have house rules. I expect everyone to help and respect the space I've built." There was a beat of stunned silence, then she whispered, "Of course, Mom. Anything. Thank you." That night, I walked through every room of my little cottage, imagining what it would be like to share my haven again, not as a guest, but as a host on my own terms. I made a list of the things I would and would not allow: no taking over my kitchen. No slamming doors. No treating me like I was invisible. But I also remembered what forgiveness could do, how second chances, when truly earned, could transform people. I sat at my kitchen table, wrote Maggie a long letter I never sent, and tucked it into the pages of my notebook. I prayed that if my daughter did come, she would bring not just her baggage, but also her willingness to change. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance and rain drummed against the windows. I poured myself a glass of wine, wrapped myself in a shawl, and waited, steady, ready, no longer afraid of what the world would bring. It was 2 weeks later, late on a Saturday afternoon, when Maggie and Andrew finally appeared at my doorstep. The sky was bruised with summer clouds, threatening rain, and the sound of their car tires crunching on the gravel sent a ripple through the quiet that had settled over my cottage. I watched from the kitchen window as they stepped out of the car. Maggie's hair was pulled back in a messy knot, her eyes shadowed and tired, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Andrew looked older somehow, his suit jacket wrinkled, his face set in a careful mask. Behind them, the back seat of their hatchback was packed to the roof: boxes, clothes, a few kitchen items, a wilted peace lily drooping from the cup holder. I met them on the porch, steadying my breath. For a second, none of us spoke. Maggie looked up at me with a nervous, hopeful smile. "Hi, Mom." I nodded, feeling a wave of old pain and new resolve rise up inside me. "Come inside before it starts to pour," I said, holding the door open. They stepped over the threshold like guests in a stranger's house. The cottage seemed smaller now, their presence filling every corner. I offered them tea, and we sat in the little living room, the silence between us thick as honey. Finally, Andrew cleared his throat. "Thank you for letting us come, Emily. We, don't have anywhere else." Maggie squeezed his hand, her voice shaking. "We tried everything, Mom. We listed the apartment, sold what we could, but the jobs, they just aren't coming back." And with the baby due in a few months, her voice cracked, and she looked away. I remembered, with a flash of anger and sadness, the way they discussed my options when I was at my lowest. But I also saw how humbled and frightened they were now, and how much courage it had taken for them to ask for help. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and answered, "You're welcome to stay. But this isn't going to be like before. You're not here as guests. You're here as part of this household, and that means pitching in, respecting the rules, and treating each other with kindness." Andrew nodded quickly. "Of course. Anything you need, will do." I stood and gestured to the small guest room at the back of the house. "It's not much, but it's yours for now. We share the kitchen, and everyone helps with the chores. I wake up early to work in the garden, and I expect help with meals and cleaning. No exceptions. And Maggie, when the baby comes, we'll figure it out. But everyone needs to pull their weight." Maggie looked up, eyes shining with gratitude and something like relief. "Thank you, Mom. I mean it." That first night, as I lay in my room listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my daughter and son-in-law settling in, I felt a strange mix of pride and apprehension. I had built this space for myself, for my own peace, but life had brought my family back to me, tattered, changed, uncertain. I wondered if they understood what it meant to rebuild, not just a home, but a sense of trust. The next morning, I set a list of chores on the kitchen table and waited. I heard soft voices, the clatter of mugs, the shuffle of tired feet. When Maggie appeared, hair tangled, eyes wary, I handed her a dish towel and pointed to the sink. "We're all in this together now." She smiled, a little broken, but determined. "Yes, Mom. We are." Outside, rain pelted the garden, drenching the marigolds and nasturtiums. Inside, for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of hope, tentative and new, but real. My life had changed, and so had theirs. This was not the family I had dreamed of, but maybe it was the one we all needed. The days that followed were anything but easy. Living together again, we all felt the weight of the past pressing in from the edges. Maggie and Andrew were different now, humbled, yes, but also uncertain, like people learning to walk on unfamiliar ground. At first, the chores felt awkward. Andrew chopped vegetables with the careful attention of a man who'd rarely cooked for himself. Maggie, so used to delegating or outsourcing, fumbled with laundry, burning her hand on the old iron and laughing ruefully. I tried to lead by example, waking at sunrise to tend the garden and mend the picket fence. Sometimes Maggie would join me, her steps tentative at first, but she soon found a rhythm, clipping herbs, pulling weeds, listening to the birds. On quiet mornings, we worked in companionable silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. At meals, we learned each other's habits all over again. Andrew, who'd always left for the office before breakfast, now lingered at the table, asking questions about recipes and garden plans. Maggie grew fond of baking, filling the cottage with the scent of cinnamon bread and peach cobbler. There were still rough edges, nights when stress boiled over into sharp words, or days when fatigue brought everyone low. But there was a new honesty, a willingness to apologize and try again. I watched them, sometimes from a distance, sometimes close up, and saw the transformation happening in slow, stubborn increments. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about relearning respect, gratitude, and the value of small comforts. One afternoon, as thunderclouds built over the fields, Maggie came to find me in the garden. She was breathless, her cheeks flushed. "Can I talk to you, Mom? Alone?" We sat together on the porch, the air thick with the scent of wet earth. She stared at her hands for a long time before she spoke. "I never realized how much you did for us," she said, voice trembling. "When you lived with us, I took it for granted. I thought I was helping you, but I see now I wasn't really giving you anything at all. I'm sorry, Mom. For everything, for making you feel unwelcome, for treating you like an obligation." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I kept my tone steady. "Thank you, Maggie. That means more than you know. But I need you to understand, this isn't just about saying sorry. It's about building something different this time. Real family. Respect. No more taking or giving out of guilt." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I want that, too. I want the baby to grow up seeing us take care of each other." A heavy rain began to fall, drumming on the porch roof, washing the dust from the world. For the first time in a long time, I reached for my daughter and pulled her into a real embrace, the kind that spoke of forgiveness and new beginnings. Inside, Andrew had started a stew on the stove. The whole cottage filled with warmth, the windows fogging up as the storm raged outside. After dinner, we all sat in the living room, talking about the future, what the baby would need, how we'd manage expenses, who would take on which chores. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the rain and the distant hum of Maggie's soft laughter, I felt something shift deep inside. We were no longer pretending at family. We were choosing it, day by day, mess and all. There would be more storms, more nights of worry and doubt. But for the first time in years, I trusted that whatever came next, we would face it together, and that was enough. The last weeks of Maggie's pregnancy drew us together in ways I couldn't have imagined. The cottage, once a sanctuary for one, adapted to become a home for many. We took turns preparing meals, making lists for the new arrival, and reorganizing the guest room into a nursery. Andrew painted the walls a gentle shade of sage while Maggie carefully arranged thrifted toys and folded tiny onesies into drawers. We bickered over the best place for the crib, what color curtains would help the baby sleep, whether we needed blackout blinds at all. But beneath the small squabbles, something unspoken passed between us, a recognition of how far we'd come, and how much we'd needed to lose in order to find each other again. Maggie had changed in ways that moved me. She took initiative in the kitchen, helped Andrew with the bills, even sat beside me in the evenings to knit tiny hats and booties from yarn Mrs. Connors had dropped off. One night, as we rocked side by side on the porch, she confided, "I'm scared, Mom. About being a mother. About not having enough to give." I squeezed her hand. "You already have what matters most. Love. Determination. The willingness to ask for help and to say thank you. That's more than I had when you were born." She smiled, her eyes shining. "Thank you for giving us this chance. For giving me another chance." Andrew, too, had become someone new. The first weeks had been hard on his pride, but necessity bred humility, and he learned to find purpose in everyday tasks. He fixed leaky faucets, chopped firewood, took odd jobs for neighbors, and found solace in honest work. Sometimes, I caught him staring at Maggie with a look of pure, aching gratitude, as if he finally understood the fragile strength it took to keep going. When Maggie went into labor, it was a wild, stormy night. The electricity flickered, rain lashed the windows, and the old Honda I'd bought with my winnings was pressed into emergency service. Andrew drove through the dark while I coached Maggie's breathing in the back seat, my heart pounding with every contraction. We made it to the hospital just as the sky split with thunder. The hours blurred into a haze of bright lights, worried nurses, and Maggie's soft cries. I held her hand, wiped her brow, and whispered stories of the day she was born, how small and fierce she'd been even then. When the baby arrived, a girl, with a down of dark hair and her mother's strong lungs, relief washed through me like a baptism. Maggie wept as she held her daughter for the first time. "We'll call her Grace," she whispered, the name a promise and a prayer. Andrew bent over them both, his face crumbling with gratitude, and for a moment the three of them glowed in the dim light of the recovery room, whole, together, forgiven. When we brought Grace home to the cottage, neighbors appeared at our door with casseroles and handmade quilts. Mrs. Connors organized a meal train, and someone left a bundle of fresh daffodils on the porch each morning for a week. Our home was full of laughter, baby cries, and the soft chaos of new life. Late at night, after everyone else had fallen asleep, would walk through the house, touching the door frames, the window glass, the kitchen counter. I'd built this life with trembling hands and stubborn hope, brick by brick, moment by moment. The world outside still spun with uncertainty, but inside these walls, we had found something better than luck. We had found each other again. Summer in the cottage bloomed with a peace I'd only ever glimpsed in passing. The garden, once lonely, was now alive with laughter and new beginnings. Maggie moved with the quiet confidence of a woman changed by hardship. Grace nestled against her chest as she watered tomatoes and snipped basil for dinner. Andrew found steady work at a hardware store nearby, the kind of job he'd once dismissed but now took pride in, coming home each evening with sawdust on his sleeves and stories to tell. We fell into a rhythm, the days marked by babies' nap times and the clatter of dishes, by neighbors stopping by with advice or a spare zucchini. Evenings on the porch became sacred, a ritual of coffee, shared memories, and sometimes just comfortable silence. I caught myself watching my family, marveling at how resilience and kindness had remade us all. One golden afternoon, Maggie joined me in the garden, Grace gurgling on a blanket beside us. She knelt, planting marigolds in the soil, and said softly, "Do you ever regret it, Mom? Letting us come back? After everything?" I shook my head, brushing the hair from her brow. I used to think forgiveness meant erasing the past. But I know now it's about building something better in spite of it. You've both earned your place here. I've earned mine, too. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes, and we worked in easy partnership until the sun slid behind the sycamore. Later, as dusk settled, Andrew sat with Grace on his lap, Maggie by his side, and I listened to them talk about dreams, a home of their own one day, teaching Grace to ride her first bike, hosting holiday dinners for the neighbors who'd become friends. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the loneliness, the bitterness, the unexpected windfall, and the chance to finally reclaim my dignity and my voice. I remembered all the years I'd been invisible, and how, through heartbreak and hard choices, I'd become someone I could be proud of. That night, after Grace was asleep, we gathered around the kitchen table. Maggie took my hand, Andrew squeezed my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt whole, like I belonged exactly where I was. Before heading to bed, I stood outside under the moon, the air heavy with honeysuckle and hope. I closed my eyes and thanked the universe for second chances, for the power to change, for the courage to love again, for the family that had finally come home. To everyone listening, if this story moved you, if you've ever been overlooked, left behind, or forced to start over, know this: it's never too late to claim your worth, to write your own ending, to open your heart to forgiveness and to new beginnings. If you believe in the power of hope and resilience, I'd love for you to subscribe, share this video, and leave a comment about the moment your own life turned around. Your story matters. Thank you for being here with me.